There were giants on the earth in those days, and many strange things occurred. Their strength was enormous, and their arms reached to the skies. Egyptian myth, Manethaeus Aegyptia. Greetings, mortals, and a capital day to you all. I am your humble host, Simeon, and you have wandered, perhaps by accident or by fate, into a place that some call the Library of Gnosis. Welcome, traveler. Giants of old, towering men of impossible stature, their bodies carved from muscle and raw power, their strength so great that they could tear trees from the earth like we might pick weeds. To stand before one is to feel the full weight of insignificance. Their massive frames cast shadows that blot out the sun. They are awe itself made flesh. Yet, in the stories we inherit, filtered through the moral machinery of church and empire, these beings are reduced to ravenous man-eaters, mindless brutes driven by violence and hunger, demons in the flesh, abominations. What if that image, the savage man-eater, the demonic titan, is not truth, but propaganda? A myth born of ignorance and control. A distortion pushed by those who sought to bury ancient knowledge under layers of dogma and false authority. What if the reality of giants is far stranger and far more human than you ever imagined? And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, "The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of a great stature." Numbers 13:32. It's a familiar trope. Claim the land is cursed, demonize its people, brand them savages and cannibals. Classic colonizer tactics. Demonization is easier than diplomacy, and dehumanizing your enemy makes conquest feel righteous. After all, history is written by the victors. But truth is often buried with the defeated. Even in the Book of Enoch, which was written by Yahweh worshippers who were hostile to the Nephilim, even there they were not merely monsters, but teachers. It says that they shared forbidden knowledge with humanity, metallurgy, herbalism, magic, the secrets of the stars and the movements of the heavens. Dangerous knowledge, liberating knowledge, the kind of knowledge those in power fear. This wisdom was not destroyed. It was hidden, preserved within mystery schools, passed down through secret orders, protected from those who would twist or suppress it for their own dark ambitions. And here is where the story truly shifts. Adam and Eve. According to some traditions, they were giants themselves, immense radiant beings, the first humans born into a larger, more vital earth. The Nephilim were even greater. And Noah, not just a righteous man, but a descendant of these beings, carrying the royal bloodline. The flood story, when viewed through this lens, becomes less about cleansing sin and more about resetting a world of giants and gods. A world of ancient power. So, maybe the giants were not monsters. Maybe they were something else, stewards of ancient knowledge, guardians of lost truths, scapegoats in a story rewritten by those who feared what they represented. The question is no longer if they existed, but why their story was buried. Nephilim means fallen, as in fallen in battle. As in they lost the wars they were involved in. They were outnumbered and overpowered, and perhaps even had some supernatural enemies. The answer to this mystery is what I hope to enlighten mankind with in today's broadcast, so stay tuned. It begins with Cain, the first son of Adam and Eve. After being cast out, he becomes the first city builder, founding a city named Enoch after his son. In some Masonic traditions and fringe esoteric writings, like the Koch manuscript and old charges, Cain is seen as the first builder. He builds the first city, Enoch, named after his son. Though the biblical Cain is marked as a murderer, some secret traditions reinterpret him as a pioneer of civilization, metallurgy, and the arts. Knowledge can both be creative and destructive. This theme ties into Freemasonry's dual view of tools. They can build temples or cause harm. Cain's line is sometimes linked to the beginning of operative masonry, i.e. practical building knowledge. After Abel's death and Cain's exile, the divine narrative continues through Seth, who becomes the restoration of the righteous bloodline, the seed that carries divine order forward. Eve names Seth, saying, "God has appointed me another seed instead of Abel, whom Cain slew." Genesis 4:25. The name Seth, Sheth, literally means appointed or placed, symbolizing renewal, the divine continuation of humanity after the fall and the fratricide. Some say Seth's line represents the sons of God, contrasted with Cain's descendants, the sons of men. Seth's lineage continues in Genesis 5, from Seth all the way down to Noah, who, of course, becomes the preserver of humanity through the flood, a new Adamic figure. From Noah's son, Shem, whose name means name or renown, comes the Semitic lineage, the Hebrews. This continues down to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Israel. From Jacob's son Judah descends David, the royal archetype. The Gospel of Luke traces Jesus Christ's lineage all the way back to Adam through Seth, not Cain, showing him as the restoration of the divine seed line. Cain's line represents the earthly, material, and violent aspects of humanity. City builders, inventors, but spiritually estranged. Seth's line represents the spiritual and prophetic stream, those who call upon the name of the Lord. In esoteric and Gnostic traditions, Seth becomes the father of the Sethian or pneumatic, spiritually awakened race. A symbol of divine wisdom hidden within humanity. The Masonic legend of Enoch, especially as preserved in Royal Ark Masonry, and works like Enochian lore, tells that from Cain's line comes Tubal-Cain. Tubal-Cain is a biblical figure mentioned in Genesis 4:22. And Selah, she also bare Tubal-Cain, an instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. Tubal-Cain is sometimes seen as the ancestor of smith gods and secret initiates, the master of metallurgy and forging tools, revered in Masonic symbolism as the first artificer in metals. A symbol of power, craftsmanship, and hidden knowledge. Tubal-Cain represents the heritage of the craft, the idea that true Masons carry a lineage of sacred knowledge dating back to antediluvian, pre-flood times. He is also associated with the power of transformation, just as metal is forged in fire. The initiate is spiritually forged through trial. His name is the password in some higher Masonic degrees, especially in older rituals and fringe rites. Then comes the righteous Enoch of Seth's line. Not Cain's son, but often linked in Masonic lore. Enoch received divine knowledge from God in a vision. He inscribed this knowledge, sometimes the name of God, or sacred sciences, on a golden triangle, or in a secret vault. Fearing the destruction of civilization, either by fire or flood, he constructs two pillars, Boaz and Yashin, to preserve the sacred knowledge. One of marble, resistant to fire, and one of brass, resistant to water. This becomes a key part of Masonic mythology. The search for lost, hidden, or ancient knowledge. Nimrod, the mighty hunter and ruler, unites humanity to build the Tower of Babel, a structure meant to reach heaven, unlock the gates of the gods, Bab-El, and recapture the divine power lost since Eden. Nimrod is said to have employed craftsmen and builders to construct the Tower of Babel, the original attempt to reach heaven or bridge the gap between divine and human realms. Masonic traditions often implies that Nimrod helped spread the secret of Masonry among nations, even as Babel fell. The name Bab-El, Bab-Ilu in Akkadian literally means gate of God or gate of the gods. In esoteric interpretations, this suggests an ancient technology, perhaps a stargate, or knowledge that opened access to the divine realms, possibly through language, ritual, or sacred architecture. The tower becomes a metaphor for ascending levels of initiation from earth to heaven. This is why Freemasonry reveres the construction of temples and the idea of climbing toward enlightenment through degrees, much like climbing a symbolic tower. After Babel, Noah's son, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, becomes the ancestors of nations. In esoteric lore, Japheth's line is often connected to European, Indo-Aryan, or Hyperborean bloodlines. Hyperborea, a mystical northern land in Greek mythology, despite their location in an otherwise frigid part of the world. The Hyperboreans were believed to inhabit a sunny, temperate, and divinely blessed land. In many versions of the story, they lived north of the Riphean mountains, which shielded them from the effects of the cold north wind. The oldest myths portray them as the favorites of Apollo, and some ancient Greek writers regarded the Hyperboreans as the mythical founders of Apollo's shrines at Delos and Delphi. Modern scholars consider the Hyperborean myth to be an amalgamation of ideas from ancient utopianism, edge of the earth stories, the cult of Apollo, and exaggerated reports of phenomena in Northern Europe, e.g. the Arctic midnight sun. Hyperborea was said to be inhabited by a race of enlightened beings, often described as giant-like and long-lived. They were believed to possess great wisdom, living in harmony with divine forces. Some esoteric traditions connect Hyperborea with lost ancient civilizations, such as Atlantis, suggesting that its inhabitants had access to high spiritual and technological advancements. Greek legend asserts that the Boreades, who were the descendants of Borea and the snow nymph Coin, founded the first theocratic monarchy on Hyperborea. This legend is found preserved in the writings of Aelian. This god, Apollon, has as priests the sons of Borea, North Wind, and Coin, Snow, 3 in number, brothers by birth, and 6 cubits in height, about 2.7 meters. End quote. Diodorus Siculus added to this account. And the kings of this Hyperborean city and the supervisors of the sacred precinct are called Boreadae, since they are descendants of Boreas, and the succession to these positions is always kept in their family. The Boreades were thus believed to be giant kings, around 10 feet or 3 meters, who ruled Hyperborea. No other physical description of the Hyperboreans are provided in classical sources. However, Aelius Herodanius, a grammarian in the 3rd century, wrote that the mythical Arimaspi were identical to the Hyperboreans in physical appearance, and Stephanus of Byzantium in the 6th century wrote the same. The ancient poet Callimachus described the Arimaspi as having fair hair, but it is disputed whether the Arimaspi were Hyperboreans. According to Herodianus, the Arimaspi were close in appearance to the Hyperboreans, making the inference that the Hyperboreans had fair hair being potentially valid. The Scythians claim divine ancestry in their myths and traditions. If you're not familiar with the Scythians, then you will find no better videos on the subject than on Asha Logo's channel. Go check him out. According to Herodotus' histories, the Scythians trace their origin to Targiteos, a semi-divine figure born from the union of Zeus and a daughter of the river Borysthenes, likely the Dnieper River. Targiteos' 3 sons became the ancestors of different Scythian tribes, with divine golden objects: a plow, a yoke, a cup, and a battle axe, descending from the sky to confirm their rule. This myth reinforces the idea that the Scythians saw themselves as divinely chosen rulers of the steppes. Additionally, their warrior kings and nobles often emphasized their connection to gods like Zeus and local deities through rituals, burial practices, and symbols of power. Targiteos, or Scythes, was the ancestral god of the Scythians according to Scythian mythology. The ancient Greeks identified him with their own hero, Heracles. In Greek mythology, Heracles was said to have traveled to the land of the Hyperboreans during one of his labors. The Hyperboreans were, as mentioned, a mythical people who lived beyond the North Wind, a place often idealized as peaceful, blessed, and untouched by war or disease. Some versions of the myth have Hercules traveling far north to retrieve the golden apples from Hesperides, or to perform other heroic deeds, encountering peoples that later Greeks interpreted as real northern tribes. In this context, Heracles' legendary journey could be interpreted by later writers as an encounter with the Scythians, a historical nomadic people who lived on the Eurasian steppe north of the Black Sea. By late antiquity and in Roman times, it became increasingly common to reinterpret mythological geography in terms of known peoples and lands. So Heracles' northern journey was recast as contact with the Scythians. In Olympian Ode 3, Pindar places Perseus and Heracles in contact with the Hyperboreans. While Pindar doesn't give a full narrative, he mentions the Hyperboreans in the context of divine favor and mythic travel. Neither by ship nor on foot could you find the marvelous road to the assembly of the Hyperboreans. Olympian Ode 3. This echoes the idea that Heracles ventured far in his labors and encountered such distant, blessed peoples. Herodotus recounts Scythian legends of Heracles' travels through their lands. In histories, he tells a tale where Heracles visits Scythia and fathers the Scythian race with a local snake woman. Heracles came to this land which was then desert, and he lay with her, the snake woman, and she bore him 3 sons, Herodotus. Although Herodotus doesn't directly name the Hyperboreans here, the northern setting of Scythia is consistent with other myths that place Heracles in the far north. Diodorus gives an account of Heracles visiting the far north, where he encounters mythical peoples during his wanderings. This is one of the more explicit references to Heracles being in Hyperborean lands. It is said that Heracles also visited the Hyperboreans and was honored by them. Diodorus Siculus. Julius Evola's vision of the Hyperboreans is central to his esoteric understanding of human origins, race, and spiritual decline. He draws on Indo-European myth, Hermetic symbolism, and traditionalist metaphysics to describe the Hyperboreans as a primordial, polar race, a spiritual archetype rather than a purely biological one. Evola, following thinkers like René Guénon, saw human history as descending from a northern, polar origin, a sacred center symbolized by the North Pole, Mount Meru or Thule. The Hyperborean race corresponds to the first, highest human type, the Uranian or solar man, whose essence was spiritual sovereignty, transcendence, and unity with the divine. Hyperborea literally means beyond the north wind, a mythical realm of light, purity, and immortality found in Greek, Vedic, and Nordic myth alike. It is not merely a geographical place, but a metaphysical pole representing the axis mundi, or the spiritual center around which the cosmos is ordered. In Evola's cyclical view of time, similar to Hindu yugas, humanity has fallen from the Hyperborean Golden Age into progressively darker ages. The first Hyperborean age was polar, solar, and spiritual. The second Atlantean age was lunar, heroic, and dominated by priest-kings. The later ages, Semitic, modern, democratic, are increasingly materialistic and disconnected from the transcendent axis. Thus, the Hyperborean man represents the archetype of the solar or Uranian race, whose decline gave birth to the various southern or Telluric races of later history. Evola's concept of race is metaphysical rather than biological. The Hyperborean is not simply an ancestor in the Darwinian sense, but a state of being. The pure type of man whose consciousness was oriented upward, towards the transcendent pole. In The Mystery of the Grail, 1937, Julius Evola develops his vision of the Hyperborean tradition even further, interpreting the Grail legend as Western continuation of the primordial polar mystery. The Grail becomes for him not merely a Christian symbol, but a veiled remnant of the Hyperborean initiatic current, a spiritual inheritance from the lost northern center. Evola interprets the Grail as a Western echo of the primordial tradition, whose first center was the Hyperborean North. The Grail is the symbol of immortality, of the sacred polar light that once shone in the Golden Age. When Hyperborea disappeared, that light was preserved and transferred, first to Atlantis, then to Aryan and solar lineages such as the Indo-European, Iranian and Celtic traditions. Finally, it re-emerged in the medieval Grail cycle, cloaked in Christian and chivalric form. In short, the Grail myth represents the hidden survival of the Hyperborean mystery in the West. Evola connects the Grail to polar and solar symbols. The Grail Castle is a center, a new axis mundi, mirroring the lost Hyperborean pole of the world. The Grail itself is radiant, luminous, like the polar light, the undying northern sun that never sets. The King of the Grail, often wounded or absent, reflects the fallen spiritual sovereignty of the modern world. The King's wound being the loss of the original Hyperborean power. Thus, the Grail Quest is the symbolic journey to reclaim the polar center within oneself, to re-establish contact with the transcendent source. Evola interprets the medieval knight as the Western version of the Aryan hero, the man who seeks to reintegrate the solar principle in a world that has grown dark. The Grail Knight's virtues, valor, purity, and detachment, mirror the Uranian, skyborn qualities of the Hyperborean man. The quest is not for moral salvation, but initiation. A transformation of consciousness that restores the inner axis, making the knight a polar being again. He contrasts this with purely Christian interpretations, which he sees as overly sentimental or moralistic. For Evola, the Grail Knight represents an initiatic warrior, not a penitent sinner. Central to Evola's reading is the healing of the Fisher King, whose wound symbolized the broken connection between heaven and earth, between the king, spiritual authority, and the land, the body of civilization. The successful Grail Knight restores the king and the kingdom, reuniting the human and divine orders. This is a metaphor for the restoration of the Hyperborean axis, the rebirth of the solar transcendent principle in the world. Evola saw this as the supreme task of the spiritual elite, to reawaken the polar flame that has been buried under centuries of decadence and materialism. In Evola's framework, the Hyperborean tradition is the primordial solar wisdom. The Atlantean phase is the later oceanic and priestly transformation. The Grail is the reappearance in the medieval West as a secret continuation of the ancient royal initiatic line. The Grail legend therefore signals that the polar light did not vanish. It went underground, hidden in myth and symbol, waiting for those capable of decoding and reactivating it. Evola holds both an inner initiatic and outer civilizational interpretation. The inner: the seeker must rediscover the Grail, his own inner axis, the center of the world within. The outer: a true aristocrat or heroic order might one day rebuild society upon those same Hyperborean principles, fusing authority and transcendence once again. For Evola, the mystery of the Grail is the Western myth of return to the pole. The Grail is the hidden light of the North, the lost crown of the Hyperborean kings, shining now in the heart of the initiates who dare to seek it. It is a call to restore the solar, polar, transcendent spirit in a darkened age, a rebirth of the Hyperborean flame through heroic realization. Nordic or Aryan in Evola's usage is often shorthand for spiritual orientation, not necessarily ethnic origin. He spoke of the race of the spirit, men who, regardless of birth, embody the Hyperborean principle of mastery, detachment, and solar will. For Evola, the ultimate goal of initiation and heroic action was a return to the Hyperborean state, a recentering on the axis mundi within oneself. This meant to reawaken the polar solar principle inside the soul, rising above the telluric, lunar, or feminine forces of modern civilization, recovering the Olympian attitude of transcendence, virility, and inner sovereignty. In his eyes, the Hyperborean man was the prototype of the man who stands, the Ver, the one who reasserts cosmic order in a world of dissolution. Evola links the Hyperboreans to multiple traditions. Apollo, who comes from Hyperborea, symbolizes the solar principle. Odin and Asgard echo the northern polar origin. Mount Meru, Tula or Thule are names for the primordial spiritual pole. The White Island, Shveta Dvipa in Hindu lore, and Avalon in Celtic mythology are reflections of the same archetype. All these point to a common ancestral myth of the North, where the world's first initiates ruled in harmony with cosmic order before the fall into matter and time. For Evola, the Hyperboreans were not a lost tribe, but a spiritual condition. The state of man before fragmentation, before history, when kings were sages and gods walked among men. His call was not to return northward in geography, but inward to the polar center of being. Historically, the Knights Templar were a monastic military order tasked with protecting pilgrims in the Holy Land. But soon after their rise, medieval Grail romances, especially Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival, began to describe knights who guarded a mysterious Grail temple in the east, led by an order called the Templars of the Grail. Wolfram explicitly says the Grail was kept by a company of knights who served no worldly lord, chosen by divine destiny and clearly inspired by the real Templars. From there, myth and history began to blur. The Templars became the earthly mirror of a celestial order, guardians of a divine mystery. When the Templars were suppressed in 1307, legend sprang up that they had hidden a great secret, a sacred relic, perhaps the Grail itself. Some claim they discovered the Ark of the Covenant, or the Holy Grail beneath Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, hence their name. Others believed that they preserved the bloodline of Christ, the sang real, or royal blood. Esoteric interpretations saw it not as a cup or object, but a spiritual power, a vessel of divine fire, guarded by an initiatic elite. In Evolian or traditionalist terms, this treasure is the lost polar light, the same Hyperborean flame hidden under Christian symbolism. In Evolus, the mystery of the Grail, the Templars were the Western bearers of the initiatic royal line, continuing the Hyperborean tradition in Christian form. The Grail symbolized the transcendent solar principle. The Templars embodied the warrior initiates who sought union with that principle through discipline, hierarchy, and inner transformation. Their fall represents the final eclipse of the sacred regality in the West. The severing of the link between the spiritual and temporal powers. The Grail, therefore, did not disappear with the Templars. It went underground, remaining accessible only to those capable of restoring the polar consciousness they once embodied. For Evola, temple and pole are equivalent ideas. The temple is the microcosmic representation of the Axis Mundi, the world center. The Templars' name, Knights of the Temple, signified guardians of that spiritual axis. Their inner structure mirrored that of initiatic centers, combining monastic contemplation, spiritual axis, and martial action, solar force. Their vow of poverty, chastity, and obedience was meant to unite asceticism and sovereignty, the two poles of the Hyperborean tradition. Thus, they weren't just monks or soldiers. They were a living echo of the primordial solar order. In Grail lore, the Grail Castle stands beyond the world, accessible only to the pure and valorous. This mirrors the Templar idea of a hidden spiritual kingdom, an order within the order that served the divine rather than any temporal power. The Grail Castle is the invisible temple. The Grail King is the spiritual sovereignty. The Templar is the knight of the inner order, whose task is to reclaim the lost center. After their suppression, legends arose about the Hidden Templars, or Order of the Grail, continuing in secret. In Rosicrucian, alchemical, and hermetic circles, the Templars were seen as initiates who preserved the solar secret. Some claimed they merged with the Order of Christ in Portugal. Others that they continued as the Scottish Rite or Freemasonry. In mythic terms, they became guardians of the Grail Flame, awaiting a future time of renewal. For Evola, this mirrored the cyclical principle. Even when the world descends into darkness, the polar center never dies. It remains veiled, preserved by a hidden few. Now let us return to the Old Testament. In Numbers 14, the Israelites are on the edge of Canaan. Yet they are terrified and want to turn back to Egypt. Caleb and Joshua describe the land as one flowing with milk and honey, meaning abundant and nurturing. This phrase is symbolic of prosperity, fertility, and sustenance. But it also reflects an actual diet of pastoral and agricultural wealth, milk from livestock, and honey from bees or date syrup. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel, and Joshua the son of Nun, and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rent their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, The land which we passed through to search it is an exceedingly good land. If Yahweh delights in us, then he will bring us into this land, and give it to us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against Yahweh, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and Yahweh is with us. Fear them not. Numbers 14. The Scythians, as described by Herodotus and other sources, were nomadic steppe people who relied heavily on animal products. They drank mare's milk, sometimes fermented into kumis, and honey was a key sweetener and preservative in their culture. A milk and honey diet symbolizes both simplicity and survival in a pastoral context, which mirrors the biblical imagery of abundance derived from herding and natural harvest. He says that they eat honey, milk, and cheese, living a peaceable life. Strabo on the Mysians, quoted by Philip Harland. In the same context, Strabo, or his sources, explicitly links the Scythian-type peoples to dairy consumption and justice. But the Scythians, law-abiding eaters of cheese made of mare's milk, Strabo on the Scythians, quoted by Philip Holland. They despise gold and silver as much as other people want them. They live on milk and honey. The use of wool and clothes is unknown among them. Although they are pinched by perpetual cold, they wear, however, the skins of wild animals, great and small. Pompeius Trogus, the adjustant's epitome of the Philippic history. These bloodlines are sometimes linked to the Merovingians, the mysterious Frankish dynasty said to have divine or semi-divine blood, possibly from the Nephilim, or the line of Jesus and Mary Magdalene in Gnostic or Templar lore. The Merovingian dynasty is said, in esoteric and alternative history, to descend from a sacred bloodline, possibly of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, as claimed in the Holy Blood, Holy Grail theory, or from ancient Nephilim-like rulers or Atlantean priest-kings. They were known as Sorcerer-Kings, often connected to fish symbolism, like the Dagobert name and the fish god Dagon. Now, I don't think it is a coincidence that early Christians used the fish as a symbol. These kings were supposedly guardians of ancient secrets, later passed on to the Knights Templar. Auj, possibly a form of Ug, king of Bashan, or a corrupted form of an antediluvian name, appears in occult text as a giant, guardian, or initiate of ancient wisdom. His role varies, but ties to pre-flood knowledge and forbidden power. Og, king of Bashan, was the last of the Rephites. His bed was decorated with iron and was more than 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. It is still in Rabbah of the Ammonites. Deuteronomy 3:11. It is not a coincidence that a current Grandmaster of the Knights Templar, Timothy Hogan, has that last name. I will let himself explain how he got that last name.
The Nephilim were on the earth in those days when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore giants to them. I've never heard you talk about giants, so.
Well, I mean, there's the giants metaphorically, and I think there were physical giants in antiquity. I mean, they found the skeletons of people over 8 feet tall all over the Americas in particular, but they've also found them in China and other places as well. And in fact, if you go to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, you can find coffins, that are some of them are as much as 12 feet tall, for individuals that we don't have the mummies now. We don't know what happened to them, but we still find the coffins for them. So, yeah, I think there were giants in antiquity for sure. And in fact, even President Thomas Jefferson American President Thomas Jefferson had sent out a group of people specifically to look for remnants of giants around North America. So, yeah, there's something to that.
And aren't there wall reliefs in Egypt as well with giant people? Like they're like tall as like palms,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Egypt. You find that in Egypt. You find that in Sumer. The ancient Native American cultures, indigenous cultures, they talk about having fought with giants that were very tall. On the Egyptian, some of the Egyptian temple, actually like funerary tombs. They have depicted in them the different races and types of people around the world, and included in it is also giants. So yeah, there's something to it.
Yeah, there's that definitely something to it. The New International Version, I think the Bible translation is called. They call them men of renown, heroes of old.
Yeah,
Heroes. That word
yeah.
I took notice to. Sometimes it's translated as mighty men. Other times it's heroes. So what kind of relationship were they? Were they all bad? Because you do hear a lot of stories of man-eating giants and.
Yeah, sure. Well, even I mean, they say even Noah came out of the Nephilim as well. So he would have been one of the sons of the Nephilim, and so I mean, I it's hard to say, I mean, of course, Goliath was also depicted as a giant, and of course, David fought Goliath. And there's also talks about the early Hebrews in the New Testament fighting and even committing genocide against these giants. I mean, I'm in a funny position because my last name is Hogan, and Hogan means son of Og, and Og was the giants of the race of giants in the Bible. Og, Magog were part of the race of giants. So my family lineage arguably could be tied to that, and of course we're tall people. So the Hogans are tall people. So we have we average 6'4", which is tall compared to people in general, but certainly if you go back 100 years when people were much shorter even than they are today, my family would have been very tall back in the day. So I think there's something to it. But I don't think they're all evil or bad or anything. I mean, there's just territorial disputes that have taken place throughout history, and we see it today, and we shouldn't expect it to be any different. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. So
people are gonna be people, no matter the size.
That's exactly
so
right.
Do you also sleep on a 13-foot bed?
I do not. But it's funny. You can another example of the tall giant-sized people includes King Arthur was said to be buried at Glastonbury, and the tomb for Arthur at Glastonbury was for someone who was almost 8 feet tall. So, when we look at ancient depictions, it's kind of on the one hand, there's the symbolic representation, right? Where it was not uncommon, particularly during the Middle Ages, for royalty and people who are in charge to be depicted as really tall, and the rest of the people shorter. But that was like a symbolic presentation of it. But on the other hand, and we might find that as well in the ancient world, where the important people or gods or whatever you want to call them are being depicted as tall relative to the common people. But it could be that there's really something to that too. I mean, in terms of their heights. Another example is in Mexico. They have the Mayan burial of Lord Pakal, and Pakal is depicted as being this very tall person, going on almost 8 feet. When you consider the population at the time from average people was only about 4.5 feet, you know, so he would have been a giant. No doubt.
Yeah, because a lot of people seem to get really hung up on like the Book of Enoch, where they're described as being very malevolent and the
Sure.
sons of fallen angels. But when you read scripture, like just read Genesis, it doesn't clearly say which side mated with. And when I think back to Gilgamesh, I mean, he started out as a cruel, tyrannical ruler. But then the gods sent Enkidu to come show him what's what, you know. And then he had this redemption arc, and he became a hero.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and you know, it's hard to know for sure, right? But I would assume that as long as they're working on behalf of humanity, they're considered good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And if they're fighting humanity for resources or something, then of course they're made out to be bad. I mean, that's what just what people do.
History is written by the victors, as they say.
That's right.
It'd be really interesting to. I was talking with my last interview. I was talking with Phoenix Aurelius. He's a great alchemist.
Yeah.
And he said it would be super interesting to know what kind of stuff they know, the giants. You know, if you talk, because there are reportings of modern day giants being seen. Like what kind of magic tricks, what kind of what perspective of history would they have?
Well, if you remember, like Tubal-Cain, for example, of the Bible, I mean, he would have been of that line, and of course, he was deemed with being the inventor of metallic operations by fire. So, you know, which would be alchemy. So it would suggest that, there was definitely an alchemical tradition being preserved and passed down by them, and even Paracelsus, the great alchemist Paracelsus, he gives special attention to Tubal-Cain, for example, as being part of that tradition.
So now we have more evidence to support the facts I have laid out, straight from the horse's mouth. Let us continue to look at the interaction between the Israelites and the giants. Next, we turned and went up along the road toward Bashan. And Og, king of Bashan, with his whole army, marched out to meet us in battle at Idrai. Yahweh said to me, "Do not be afraid of him, for I have delivered him into your hands, along with his whole army and his land. Do to him what you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who resigned in Heshbon." So Yahweh, our God, also gave into our hands Og, king of Bashan, and all his army. We struck them down, leaving no survivors. At that time we took all his cities. There was not one of the 60 cities that we did not take from them. the whole region of Argob, Og's kingdom in Bashan. All these cities were fortified with high walls and with gates and bars. And there were also a great many unwalled villages. We completely destroyed them, as we had done with Shion, king of Heshbon, destroying every city, men, women, and children. But all the livestock and the plunder from their cities we carried off for ourselves. So at that time we took from these two kings of the Amorites the territory east of the Jordan, from the Arnon Gorge as far as Mount Hermon. Hermon is called Siron by the Sidonians. The Amorites call it Sinir. We took all the towns on the plateau, and all Gilead, and all Bashan as far as Salekah and Edrei, towns of Og's kingdom in Bashan. Og, king of Bashan, was the last of the Rephites. His bed was decorated with iron and was more than 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. It is still in Rabbah of the Ammonites. Deuteronomy 3. "60 fortified cities. Men, women, and even children were not spared from the slaughter. This was not some small skirmish. This was a genocide. It's hard to understand how anyone could read this account of slaughtering women and children and still see the Israelites as the righteous side. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, warriors of renown. Genesis 6:4, New International Version. Here they are called heroes of old, warriors of renown. Does that sound like a way you would describe man-eating monsters? In Genesis 6:2, when it says, "The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were good," the Hebrew word used is tovoth, which is a feminine plural form of tov, meaning good, pleasant, or beautiful. This is the same root word used repeatedly in Genesis 1 when God declares aspects of creation good, e.g., God saw that it was good. Genesis 1:4, and God saw the light that it was good, tov. Who attacks who in these biblical stories? The Israelites send out spies to plan their attack. Whither shall we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our heart, saying, "The people is greater and taller than we. The cities are great and walled up to heaven. And moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there." Then I said unto you, "Dread not, neither be afraid of them. The Lord your God, which goeth before you, he shall fight for you, according to all that he did for you in Egypt before your eyes, and in the wilderness, where thou hast seen how that the Lord thy God bare thee, as a man doth bear his son, in all the way that ye went, until ye came into this place. Yet in this thing ye did not believe the Lord your God, who went in the way before you, to search you out a place to pitch your tents in fire by night, to shew you but what way ye should go, and in a cloud by day. And the Lord heard the voice of the words, and was wroth, and sware, saying, Surely there shall be not one of these men of this evil generation see that good land, which I swear to give unto your fathers, save Caleb the son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, and to him I shall give the land that he hath trodden upon, and to his children, because he hath wholly followed the Lord. Also the Lord was angry with me for your sake, saying, Thou also shalt not go in thither. But Joshua the son of Nun, which standeth before thee, he shall go in thither. Encourage him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit it. Moreover, your little ones, which ye said should be a prey, and your children, which in that day had no knowledge between good and evil, they shall go in thither, and unto them I will give it, and they shall possess it. But as for you, turn you and take your journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. Then ye answered and said unto me, We have sinned against the Lord. We will go up and fight, according to all the Lord our God commanded us. And when ye has girded on every man his weapons of war, ye were ready to go up into the hill. And the Lord said unto me, Say unto them, Go not up, neither fight, for I am not among you, lest ye be smitten before your enemies. So I spake unto you, and ye would not hear, but rebelled against the commandment of the Lord, and went presumptuously up into the hill. Deuteronomy 1. I mentioned before that these bloodlines are connected to masonry. Cyclopean architecture refers to a style of ancient masonry that uses massive, irregularly shaped boulders fitted closely together without the use of mortar. The term comes from the mythological Cyclopes, giant beings from Greek mythology, because later Greeks believed that only giants could have moved and placed such enormous stones. And many ancient cultures have legends attributing the construction of massive stone structures to giants of old. When you strip away the propaganda, the picture shifts. These men of heroic stature were not just warriors of renown, but teachers, stewards of hidden wisdom. They lost the wars. They were demonized and their story buried. But echoes remain in fairy tales, in Cyclopean ruins, as whispers inside of secret orders. They say all the others fled to the wilderness to survive. On very rare occasions are these men of renown still spotted even in our modern day in far remote and inhospitable places. I wonder why the story of giants almost always depict them as lonely creatures. These men of renown, warriors, teachers, stewards of hidden wisdom, were not monsters. They were the first builders, the first masons, the bearers of forbidden light. And though their temples crumble and their names fade from memory, their shadows still linger in stone, in myth, and perhaps even in blood. Earth brought forth the giants, matchless in their size, terrible, huge, and with the strength of the everlasting gods. Hesiod, Theogony. If you made it this far, then write Sorcerer-Kings in the comments below, so I know that you did. Did you learn something from the video? This video took so much time, my biggest project so far. So if you learned something, then please feel free to share it so others can also learn this valuable information. It's free. Support me on Patreon if you're able. Buy some cool merch. And I will see you, yes, specifically you listening. I will see you in the next one, mortal. Godspeed and fare thee well, traveler.